Hey guys, hope all is well. It's been about 2 weeks since I made a video, and I apologize for being gone for so long. Life has just been busy. I actually very recently secured a full-time job, so there's some responsibilities connected with that, and well, stuff happens. Um, in this video, I'm going to continue the series I've been doing for a little while called Chess Secrets You Wish You Knew. Um, and in this video, the lesson that I want to get across is this. When you don't really, when you have a choice between several good moves, essentially you want to choose the one that keeps you the most flexible. The reason for that is because you keep your options open and don't spoil positions that might actually work out for you. And I saw that in a game today that really caught my eye in the Grinky Chess Classic, and I wanted to point that out. But I also want to give a few examples from my own games to sort of illustrate that point. So what do we mean by keeping flexibility? Well, what we mean is we want to be able to essentially not compromise our position and keep our options open. So it's sort of identifying where your strengths lie and trying to essentially keep the position moving or keep it going if you're not really sure what to do. So this is a position today from the game between Hou Yifan and Magnus Carlsen. Hou Yifan was on 2 out of 2 before this game, and Carlsen was on 1 out of 2 with 2 draws. And Hou Yifan had a pretty decent position here because Carlsen, really wanting to try to get the advantage, played the very vain move b5. b5 is a clear mistake, but it's a move that Carlsen made just sort of because he wanted to keep the game going and get some sort of imbalance going. But b5 is a really critical mistake because after the simple en passant with a takes b6 and then rook takes b6, all of a sudden black has created an extra pawn island for no apparent reason, namely this pawn on a6, which is weak and isolated. And already black is saddled with the backward d6 pawn. So all of a sudden, black has created an extra weak pawn, really for not much activity. I mean, the rook on b6, okay, it has a b file, but not really. And so white's actually clearly better here. And so over the course of the next few moves, Hou Yifan strengthens her position very well. She plays rook d5, a great move, putting the rook on the weak d5 square, and also preparing the movement, facilitating the movement up this knight on f3, so that after rook c6, knight d2, excellent move, rerouting the knight to the c4 square. Knight b7, really a sight for sore eyes. That knight on b7 just really ugly there. Knight c4, rook b5, and now a wonderful, wonderful move by Hou Yifan, queen a7, really tying black up. And it's here where I was like, okay, just looking through the game, like Hou Yifan is in the driver's seat. I would not be surprised if the engine was giving valuation around +1 here, because all of black's pieces are tied up. White has really good pressure on the d6 pawn and perhaps the a6 pawn, and just is structurally so much better that white should be able to make small improvements to do something in the game. And then Carlsen played queen c7, and I was like, okay, fine. Queen c7, still the knight isn't out of... Queen c7 does the job of protecting the queen so that knight takes d6 wasn't a threat as it was a move ago. For instance, if, let's say, black played king g7, knight takes d6 was a tactic because the queen on e7 was hanging. But essentially, queen c7 does take care of that. But even here, white has a major advantage because black is so boxed in, and there's a real evident pressure on the d6 pawn. And the knight on b7 still really can't move because if the knight moves, white can trade queens and then take on d6. So it really just is a great position for white. And here it's one of those positions, I don't know if there was time trouble involved, but hey, I don't even care if time trouble was involved. Hou Yifan took a step in the wrong direction. And the thing that bothers me about it is there were so many moves here that just keep the status quo. And the status quo is better for white based on the structural advantage, the pressure on the d6 pawn, the activity of white's rooks compares to the activity of black's rooks, and even the activity of the white queen and the white knight compared to her opponent's counterparts, the black queen and the black knight. All those trumps could be kept with a status quo move like king g2 if you weren't sure what to do. Just play king g2. Another move that maybe is prophylactic, or not prophylactic, but does the job of just keeping the status quo, h4. h4 is another excellent move. Maybe you entertain playing h5 and creating a pawn lever later. You give Carlsen something to think about. What you do is you make one of these moves, h4 or king g2, or even if you really weren't sure what to do, you just maybe move your rook. You could play like, you can move your rook to rook d2 back if you wanted to, or maybe even rook 1 d2 just to sort of stall and see what Carlsen does. But essentially, all these moves were options to sort of keep the flexibility in the position and not go down a path that you're unsure of that's super concrete. And here, Hou Yifan did not do that. And the game really, really, really took a turn because she missed this opportunity, because she played rook takes b5. Now, rook takes b5, I have a major problem with for a few reasons. First of all, you correct black's structure to a certain extent, right? Like after a takes b5, all of a sudden this a pawn that was weak and isolated is still isolated, but not as weak, and is captured toward the center where it's doing something a little bit closer to the action. Right? Like now, at least, there's maybe, pressure on the c4 knight. Maybe the b5 pawn is also stifling the b and c pawns a little bit. And maybe even the c pawn is backward if I mark that for a second. And so really not a step in the right direction. But the other thing it does is it actually forces the knight to move from this beautiful c4 outpost. The knight was really lovely on c4. It had perfect purpose. And now, after the move knight takes d6, the game just fizzles out. Sure, white, I guess, gets this pawn temporarily, but after knight takes d6, the queen is uncovered, so queen takes d6, queen takes c7, rook takes c7, rook takes d6, and rook takes c2. Now the material is equal, and the game just sort of fizzles out. And after a few moves, rook d5, rook e2, rook takes e5, b4. Now the threat is just rook b2, corralling the b3 pawn. So Hou Yifan played rook b5, not to allow rook b2, but it essentially just allows rook takes e4, and then it's just a draw. King g2, rook d4, king f1, rook e4, and they repeated here. But the transformation here was something that was really, really not great for Hou Yifan, considering the advantage that she had. And Carlsen had to be breathing a huge sigh of relief, because he really, compromised his position almost past the point of no return. I think sometimes he has the leverage to do this, or the leeway to do this, because his opponents respect him so much that even when they're a little bit better and it's just a tense position, he knows that he can get away with the moves that aren't really correct, per se. But I'm just going to rewind just a little bit just to sort of show you again what that position looked like before rook takes b5. In this position, there were so many choices. She could have shuffled with the rook. She could have played king g2. She could have played h4. Heck, she could have even entertained moving the queen away from a7. All those choices were superior to rook takes b5, which really just fixed black's pawn structure and really enabled black to sort of steer the game towards calmer waters, towards a draw. And you see this happen a lot where you don't keep the flexibility. Let me show you another example of this type of behavior. In fact, from two of my games. Yes, we all do this, and we all have this problem. The question is, how do you cope with it? So, in this position, I was playing, 2 years ago in the DC International against a guy named David Brodsky. He's a pretty decent junior player, and I'm totally winning here. White has a totally overwhelming position. Why is that the case? Well, even though the material is equal, I have this really strong pawn on d6, right? If I highlight that, you can see that pawn on d6. And this king on b6 right here is really caught away from the action. So it really can't enter via c7. It can't come around this way. The king is really just cut off from the action where it needs to be. And my pawn on d6 is so close to queening. The other issue is that this rook on f7 is almost paralyzed, right? It only has one square on d7, and that's problematic. This rook on f7 only has one square on d7, right? I can highlight that for you. And then the other thing is this bishop on f6, also not really a hot piece because the bishop really doesn't want to take on e5 because then my king can walk in and support my pawn. So, for example, let's say king a6 is played, or actually it's white to move, but let's just say that if bishop takes e5 was played, then king takes e5, and the king could just walk slowly but surely up to e6. You see this king could go from e5 to e6, and then shuttle this pawn home, d7, d8, queen. So really not advisable for black to take on e5. And so because of this, black's pieces are really paralyzed in many ways, and the onus is on white to find a way to sort of improve the position and get things rolling. Now, there were so many solutions here, and I made literally such a rash decision because I didn't find something clear. And believe it or not, I took on f6. And the reason that taking on f6 is so bad is because it really takes away the flexibility in the position that I actually had. After bishop takes f6, of course rook takes f6 can't be played because of d7, and then d8 queen, so g takes f6 was played. But all of a sudden, two things changed. One, my king on e4 doesn't have the potential to enter anymore because all of these squares are covered by the black pawns or the black king. But furthermore, all of a sudden, this rook on f7 has scope. It can go to g7 and h7, and it has activity. So it's really an irreparable decision that was made because I didn't keep my flexibility. And if we go back and you ask, oh, well, you say there's so many moves. Well, what moves could have been made? Well, I could have made a waiting move like rook a8 if I didn't know what to do, and just essentially hold the king on b6 in place. Because essentially now the king is almost paralyzed, and if it goes to c5, the a5 pawn gets picked off. Another move I could have made if I was unsure is I could have just played bishop f4. Just played a little bit of a waiting game, and maybe bishop e3 check could have been a really strong move because let's say that that black does wait and plays a move like rook d7. After bishop e3 check, if c5 is played to block, now my king can actually enter with king d5, and this is just a totally winning position. There's probably a few other moves. Maybe if I didn't know what to do and I was waiting, even rook c8 does that job of keeping the tension and essentially not being assuming, because this bishop on e5, this bishop on f6 really can't take the bishop on e5 because my king enters, and now a move like rook d7 might just fail to move like rook c7. So many choices, and I chose the most concrete. Sorry, after bishop f6 here, I chose the most concrete decision, but the decision that limits my flexibility. And after bishop takes f6, g takes f6, it's actually no longer winning for me because this rook can come from behind. And so I played rook e7, which doesn't solve my problem, rook f8. And I played king d4 because it was here that I realized if I played d7, now the king on c7 can come back. I seriously doubted that this would be well, here, no, not king c7 here. Rook d8 first, actually, might be advisable. The reason being that if you play king c7 now, there's d8 queen, and after king takes, rook takes. Maybe this is actually still close to winning for white because the king on d8 is cut off. So, yeah. But the point is that maybe rook d8 comes first, and essentially now then king to c7 comes, and again, the king on e4 cannot enter yet, so it's really hard to imagine this being something that white can win. Anyways, the point is I had really simple ways to win, and I didn't do it. And in just a few moves after I played king d4, now the rook came from behind with rook h8, rook e6, rook h4, and the checks from behind were sufficient to draw my king all the way to a3. And then after rook d2, rook takes f6, and king c5, well, the victory was just no more. The reason for that is because I'm going to lose one of these pawns. Okay, I played rook e6, but after b5, now black is even having the audacity to threaten mate, which is remarkable. I took and played b4 check to ensure that didn't happen. And eventually the game fizzled out into a draw, which was really disappointing for me. But really was reflective of the lack of flexibility that I had in my position that I created in my position when I had an advantage. One more example where I play in this way and I sort of muck it up when I shouldn't. This is probably one of the most painful draws of my career, actually, because I thought I really played a good game and I had my opponent on the ropes, and it's always tough when that happens. So essentially, I played a great game to this point. I was significantly underrated, and this guy was really talented at the time when we played. And I had a great position here, and I did make a great move here. I made the best move here, this really nice tactic, knight c7. Nice thing about it is that queen takes is forced because of the fork, and after queen takes f6, I just have a slightly better pawn structure, and the e4 pawn is really weak, and my f pawn is dangerous. And in a series of moves that came next, with g3, queen e6, I actually picked up a pawn because e4 is hanging. And after rook d8, queen takes, king b7, f6, and rook f8, rook df8, I'm really in the driver's seat here. I'm a pawn up to the good. I might even have the potential of having connected pass pawns if my e pawn ever got to e5. That would be nice, right, to walk it up there. And yeah, I mean, my position is just overwhelming. Also, my king is safer. My king on b1 is probably a little bit safer than this king on b7 because I have more space. But somehow here, just in a few moves, I ruined my flexibility. And I think part of it is because I was wary about the g3 pawn. And maybe, okay, I was close to the time control, and maybe I was a little bit low on time. But these considerations shouldn't really matter too much when you have a big position like this, because there's so many moves that do a sufficient job of holding it together. So one move that would have done a great job of holding it together would have been rook f3. The point is just to keep an eye on the g3 pawn and essentially maybe gang up on it. That would have been a great move. Another move that maybe would have done that job is maybe to play rook g2, maybe to just double the rooks on the g3 pawn, or just stop it in its tracks at g3. Another move that might have made some sense if I had no idea what to do, maybe even the a3 would have worked. Just giving my king an escape square so it wouldn't have to go towards the middle if there was a check. In fact, another move, I'm going to give another move that may have made sense. Maybe just like moving the queen somewhere to push the e pawn. So maybe if I played a move like, I don't know, queen e5 or something. Maybe this is a little bit brash, or maybe even queen d3. All these moves maybe made some semblance of sense. The move I played, however, really didn't make sense, and it was queen f4. And the reason it doesn't make sense is because the queen was such an asset on e4. If I go back for a second, it was hitting the h7 pawn, so the queen on c7 had to keep an eye on it. It was eyeing the diagonal here, the h1, a8 diagonal, so I was really eyeing this king. And it was just really perfectly centralized. Like, you can't get a more centralized queen than it was on e4. So there was no reason to move it from that square. And now the other reason queen f4 doesn't make a lot of sense is because rook endgames can be closer to draws, even a pawn up than other types of endgames, and where you're pawn up. And because of that, I should have really thought about the consequences of these trades. Well, to be frank, I didn't. And so in this position, after queen f4, black played rook g6 very quickly and alertly, saying, okay, not only am I entertaining the queen trade, but now I'm just gaining up on the f6 pawn. And you still haven't you haven't actually done anything to attack the g3 pawn further. It's not like the g3 pawn is more attacked here than it was a few moves ago. And here, after rook g6, I played f7, but it really wasn't, it wasn't great, because now black played g2, and after g2 I played queen takes c7, which is just an irreparable mistake. But it was a sign of the panic I'd already had playing this position, because I was a little bit uncomfortable with the g2 pawn bothering me and my rook and f1 being targeted, and I really just didn't want to be in a position where I might lose the game. But it was totally the wrong mentality, because there was no way I could lose this endgame pawn up. So I should have kept the flexibility in my position and maybe allowed black to trade queens instead of me trading for him. Because not only that, I also helped move this black king towards the center. So after king takes c7, rook f2, king d7, this king all of a sudden is a trailblazer moving towards the king side. And now this rook on g6 doesn't even have to team up on the f7 pawn. The king is going to help do the job, and it can stay putting pressure on the h6 pawn. And so now I played rook takes and rook takes h6 and rook g8, and black played king e7 and just defended super resourcefully. Takes, and even this position I could probably do better than I did, but with all of my my flaws or the mistakes I'd made to get to this point, I made a few more mistakes and the game ended in a draw. And afterwards, I was just shaking my head like I could not believe the series of mistakes I'd made to allow this to happen. But it really comes down to the flexibility. And I'm going to go back again just to show you the position after rook df8 and say there were so many options here, and I went down a very concrete path, which is the wrong approach. When you have a lot of options, stay flexible, because once you go down that concrete path, it might not work out. And that's why if you stay flexible, you could change paths. So if you have those options, keep them open. Now, there's sometimes when you do have to go down a really concrete path. In that case, you need to calculate and you need to go through your reads and do all that stuff. But when it's not warranted, just be calm, cool, and collected, and keep the status quo. The status quo is all of these little small advantages that are basically combined to actually give you the evaluation. So in the first game, with Hou Yifan and Magnus Carlsen, it was a question of, well, my pawn structure is better, my activity is better. In the second game that I drew with David Brodsky, it was clearly, activity is better, and my king is so much better, and I have this pawn that's about to queen. In this position, I'm a pawn up, and I have more space and more activity. There's no reason I should trade away those advantages. And in a series of moves, I traded away my activity. I traded away some of my space, and that was a compromise that I didn't have to give. So keep that in mind when you're playing. It's super, super useful. When you have several moves you can choose from, and they're all fairly reasonable, the ones that are really the differentiators, the ones that are probably the ones you should do, are the ones that keep your flexibility. Thanks for watching, and I'll hopefully see you soon.